Hello, and welcome to our virtual panel event, Shaping Culture as an Empowered Creative. I am Christy Francis, our moderator. I'm the research and creative director and an adjunct instructor for entrepreneurship in action at Daemen College. Thank you for joining us for the 12th in our ongoing series of live virtual panel events to talk about current events, culture, and things we should all be thinking about. So thanks go out to our sponsor, the graduate programs at Daemen College, for inspiring this conversation. So let's start out and give everyone a moment to share their name and title. So whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Well, since I'm at the top of the picture on my computer, I'll say my name is Ed Cardoni. I'm the executive director at Hall Walls Contemporary Arts Center, downtown Buffalo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Swanick-Kilpatrick. I'm the Executive Director at Art Services, Inc. We are the area's Arts Council and Resource Center for artists and nonprofit arts and cultural organizations.
Hey, everybody. My name is Annie Stoll, and I'm a Senior Art Director at Columbia Records. And previously, I was working with Sony Music, and I went to Daemen College.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Shanahan. I'm the Artistic Director of Torrance-based Theater, located in the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. I'm also a professor of entrepreneurism here at Daemen College. It's great to see everybody.
Good afternoon. My name is Idris Wadgett. I am one half of Eat Off Art, which is a creative agency, and I'm also a local visual artist, muralist, jeweler, multi-hyphenate creator.
Awesome. All right, I think that's everyone. Javon, did you introduce yourself?
I didn't. How's everybody doing? I'm not sure how my volume is sounding. My name is Javon, currently founder of Wildcat Media and Entertainment, and I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome. Okay. All right, perfect. So thank you everyone for being here. We are so excited to have you. We are going to jump right into the conversation. Okay, so how about Annie? Let's start with you. So tell me about some advice that you are glad you didn't take in your career and some that really helped you.
Oh, thanks. So just like a quick little background, I actually went to Daemen for graphic design and illustration, and I really love music design. So the story of kind of how I got from A to B is, working with really amazing musicians, and path was started by getting an internship where I worked with Brian Grunert, which you guys know owns White Bicycle in Buffalo. And so I think he gave me lots of really good advice that I took. And I think once I kind of came out to New York and started working into the more label system and the music industry, I think there's been advice that people have said that has been, just do one thing really well. But I actually, in my own experience, have found, and just being who I am and liking what I like, that it's okay to like a lot of different things and to incorporate all of that into who you are as an artist and, how you tell your story and how you work with your clients. So I think to that point, some advice I would then pass on is if that's sort of your jam and that you like a lot of things, I don't think that's a bad thing, but maybe being aware of yourself and what yours are. So as a designer, maybe there's something that you can't do. That's an opportunity for you to bring somebody in and give them an opportunity to bring them up, and to really consider how you're creating opportunities and what are the spaces that you take up and what are the spaces that you create.
Awesome. That was wonderful. I also, I just want to say, if anybody has anything to add as we're having these conversations and kind of working through these questions, feel free. So anyone can jump in at any time. Okay, so Javon.
Oh,
Go ahead. No, please.
I was gonna follow suit of what she was saying. I mean, I agree that, the advice you didn't take. As there's a whole bunch of things, and I was one of the people that was always, I won't say forced, but kind of coerced into, you got to pick one. And I understand that premise because it allows you to drill deep by picking one. However, I have a phrase where it's like, a jack of all trades and a master of some, or a master of many, where the normal phrase is a jack of all trades, a master of none. But I don't subscribe to that notion. I'm quite masterful at several of them because I allowed myself to kind of explore and, follow my muses, so to speak.
I love that. That's such a great, following your muses is such a wonderful way to put it. Anybody else? This is great. I'd love to hear more thoughts on that topic. Okay. You know what? Then here's what we're gonna do. Javon, we're gonna talk to you next. So let's talk a little bit about finding opportunities to influence culture, to take risks, and create spaces that maybe didn't exist before. So talk a little bit about your work on Wildcat Media and underground evolution, and how that idea of culture and risk-taking has sort of influenced your thought process.
Yes. So I wanted to introduce myself and to tell my story. I'm originally from New York City, Queens, and I came to Daemen College in 2017. My freshman year was, a year of, I never really went away, went to like small schools. Daemen College is a pretty small school, but typically bigger than all the schools that I've been to throughout my life. And I just wanted to find ways to get involved and, make something, of myself as I went to college. And, I took a class with Professor Shanahan. He's actually on the panel today, and this class was entrepreneurship. And, I found, a gap in, the culture that I thought would really, create some type of impact. And this kind of came from the media aspect. So you see a lot of big schools with, radio stations and, production facilities. Daemen College didn't have anything like that. And, I come from a musically inclined Black background. And the honest truth is I just wanted a space where I could, create music. And that kind of formed into so many things. Wildcat Media and Entertainment is basically, Daemen College's main, sector for student-driven engagement from the media side of things. So we do everything with Daemen sports, post-game interviews, pre-game interviews, highlights. We also have a production studio, which I'm sitting in right now, where we produce video, music content. But really and truly, it was big for the culture of Daemen. Our social media, you can see, student engagement, rise from being, 0 followers to now we're at about to hit 800 followers on Instagram. And, just seeing students getting engaged, students learning all the multimedia, facets, it's really inspiring. And to lead into underrated evolution, this is something that we started in the pandemic. Last year, we were stuck on Daemen College's campus with not much to do. And, like I said, creating music was something that I started from a young. I was really able to tap back into it last year during the pandemic. And, while being up here, a couple of friends, Jifa and Tron, we just locked in and we thought about, why can't we take this? And, underrated evolution was birthed out of that. And, it's been crazy the amount of love that we've been able to receive on just, we released a couple of songs so far. We performed a couple of times, and, I'm just excited for the future that we have. And just to touch back on some things that Annie and Idris said, just stepping outside of your comfort zone, I think is very important. I could have, laid back and been the chill guy. I'm pretty, low key guy, and but because I was stepping out of my comfort zone, I was able to unlock my potential, and see the blessings that come out of that. So that's just a little I take too long with that.
Oh, that was awesome. I think it's wonderful to hear you talk about that, and certainly being on campus and sort of seeing the influence of all these awesome creative projects that you're sort of gifting everybody else with is a really inspiring thing to see. So, okay. So Jen, I want to talk to you a little bit about connection and building a network, connecting with other people who are in these great creative spaces. So, how do you kind of build, articulate, share your vision in a way that really brings other people along? And how do you maybe manage the moments where people don't see your vision as clearly as you do? And how do you find ways to kind of bridge that?
Yeah, thanks, Christy. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the director at Art Services, Inc., and we're a resource center. And so a lot of what we do is really focused on artists doing their work in whatever capacity or whatever stage they are in their artistic and creative career, and also organizations, arts organizations, creative organizations doing their work. So it really is key for the work that we do to have connections, to network, because essentially for us in particular in the work that we do at ASI, we really need that feedback and that partnership from the field. We're really crafting the services and the programs that we provide based on what others say that they need. So really, first and foremost, it's so important for us to, be at different arts and cultural events, be present, have conversations, and really take a lot of that information and craft not only our vision, but it's other creatives' visions as well, and help them get to where they need to go. And it's important because it creates that sense of community and participation. And really, once you start making those connections, it's not just one person's vision or one, organization's vision or one coalition of artists' visions, but it becomes this bigger, greater thing that everyone feels that they have a part of. And it really makes sense because everything intertwines together, and you have that conversation and you make sure that these different elements of the creative process are highlighted, and how they can work together, not work together, is really important to have that exchange and that sharing of information. So really, it's, I'm a big fan of teamwork, participation. We're all in this together, and that really starts with just open, honest conversations. And so that starts with that very loose vision piece. Kind of thinking about your own work or your own practice. That can take on a life form of its own, and it could take weeks, months, years, decades. Everything is an evolution on top of itself. And so being really mindful of that, a vision may start, today through this panel conversation, you may start with the seed of a vision, but it may not formally, come to fruition until years from now, or it may never come to fruition in one iteration or another. So really just, making sure that you're constantly connecting with others, having those conversations, because it's going to keep evolving, the mission, your vision, and your goals and what you want to do. And you kind of just be flexible and keep moving along with it. And to answer the second part of your question, there are plenty of times when others may not agree with your vision or want to participate in your vision. And honestly, you should welcome that, because, not everyone is going to share the same vision or have the same ideas. That's what makes us so creative and so unique. So really embracing that. And I think, sometimes I think, there may be a problem if someone doesn't oppose your vision. You want somebody to kind of challenge and bring those alternate views to your vision and your goals, because that'll help you kind of understand, the other side of it, or maybe understand, what can I do to make my vision better, or why doesn't my vision fit in here? And that's okay too. And so having those conversations, and those are very honest and open conversations too, about that's fine if we're not all in agreement. Let's continue on and move on and evolve from that and just keep building on that vision.
Yes, that was awesome. So many great things to take away from that. I'm curious too, to build on this. Does anybody else have any thoughts on sort of the conversation there that Jen started?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a little bit. I liked how we were talking about, building connections and, what that means to yourself as an artist. And I kind of think that sometimes as maybe a student, you look at people and you don't always know what their journey was. It looks like, oh, they came out of nowhere and suddenly they got to do this really cool. But a lot of just your life in general is a lot of little things that kind of cosmically lead to something bigger. So sometimes you're going to have something that's a failure, or sometimes you're going to have something that you it was a connection that you didn't know ends up being something really big in the grand scheme of things. Like, for instance, I once got to meet an art director from Lucasfilm, and I got his contact information, gave him mine, and I didn't hear back for 2 weeks. And then I followed up with him, and he had a gig, and that little gig kind of set me on a certain path. And I can see that now, but at the time I was like, oh man, this didn't happen. But I think putting yourself in as many situations as you can, and being open to the universe, this is ways that you can grow your connections. Sometimes it's not very immediate, sometimes it's something that happens later. And then to that end, I think once you get a little older and you're in your career and you're doing the level, a higher level of things, you need to start thinking about okay, how can I open doors, how can I help other people bring connections and things like that. So for me as an art director, I always want to try and find, talent and connect them to the musicians that I'm working with. And so there's a lot of really amazing hashtags that you can use to find amazing artists to connect to each other. An example is Drawing While Black. And so I think being really cognizant of who, once you're in a position that you can help other people expand, I think is also something to think about as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Does anybody else have anything to add on that topic? No? Okay. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, please.
I'm just slow on the button like Jeopardy. I probably lose Jeopardy. I'm so slow on the button.
Okay.
All I wanted to add is that there's one thing that I always share when I'm working with the youth, particularly, teenagers and such, but it works for professionals, and it works for adults as well, students. And you're always on interview. Is that's a term that I always kind of share with people, meaning you may not know who's looking, and whenever you're doing your practice or whatever you're doing your art, whatever it doesn't matter what you're doing. Actually, you could be in sports, you could be any place, but you're always on interview because you never know who's looking. And those people that, if you're doing good work and you're carrying yourself with character and those sorts of things, with these good attributes, connections are also made that way, kind of effortlessly and on your behalf, by people that see you and want to make a connection with you, and want to maybe even give you an alley-oop or be your mentor, or something, or may want to be your mentee. You just never know. So I always kind of share that, you're always on interview. So always make sure you're doing your best work, putting your best self first. And, because you just never know who's looking.
I love that point. I love that point so much. I think, my mind personally comes back to the idea that there's a lot of unexpected connections, I think, that get made. It's so important not to limit yourself and think, oh, this person might not be interested in my work, but this person will be. I love your idea of just always being on interview and knowing that, something could come out of unexpected connections. So that's wonderful. Thank you all so much. We can move on to our next question now. And this is for you, Dan. So tell us about progress. How do you think the past year has influenced the landscape in your space? Where do you see things going? And how do you continue to craft these unforgettable contemporary performances, especially as it relates to the work that you do for Torn Space Theater.
Yeah, thank you. So I feel like this last year, going through the pandemic, has accelerated a trend in the field, which is looking at arts and cultural spaces outside of just the interior walls of the space. So how can we start to create larger areas for public gatherings to where the art and the public can come together? And we've seen versions of this. We see it through public murals, but we can also, I think, start to see it in terms of specifically theater. So what we just recently did with a project called Intersection was we took this notion of site-specific theater and tried to go a little further with it so that it was directly tied to the space in which it was presented. So we presented it on a kind of an abandoned lot that we have access to behind our theater on Wilson Street. And we brought in residents and businesses and community groups from that specific neighborhood into the production itself. So we staged a live cricket match with Bengali players who live in the neighborhood. We interrupted that match with this car choreography from automobiles from the neighborhood. We engaged with a local business that brought in their product into the performance itself. And what this did was it allowed us to work with people who might not normally be brought into an experimental theater process. And so this is taking this notion of arts and cultural as a place for community engagement in the live and real world. So I think that what we're wanting to see is to kind of go further away from digital representation. I know on the one hand, a lot of people are arguing that what the pandemic has taught us is that the digital format is actually something to further embrace to accelerate the distribution of arts and culture. And I'm taking an opposite stance. I think it's reinforced our need to go further into the live world, to go further into the actual world so that we can engage with individuals who we might not normally engage with. I think, arts and culturals have a good track record of being subversive as long as that subversive language is sort of tolerated by the audience that they're watching. And so it becomes its own kind of echo chamber. And I'm not quite sure if that's really benefiting the artist because they're talking to an audience that's kind of in on their message, and the audience is, I don't know how much they're benefited because they're being given a message that I think they're already accepting of. And so if we can start to expand the notion of where arts and culturals happen, and we can start to bring in more people under this kind of tent to where these ideas are starting to get exchanged and challenged and kind of bounce off of, that's I think what we've learned in this last year. And I don't think that can happen in the digital realm in the same way, because I think it flattens things. It prevents us from kind of having these interpersonal relationships that are required for this exchange of knowledge to happen. And just briefly on your last point, so kind of how are we kind of addressing this in our own performances? I think it's sort of reimagining what is spectacle moving into the 21st century. That's something that we've worked on hard for quite some time, is trying to craft the image, craft the kind of an illusion. But maybe what we're learning more through this last year is that the most kind of dynamic image is real. It's the reality of the situation, the reality of the person, the reality of the present moment, the live moment, and how can we kind of frame that and curate that and put that in a place where a public can engage with it in a really direct and meaningful way.
That's awesome. And so I'm going to improvise a little bit, Dan, based on what you were just describing, because I think one of the things that I have found so stunning recently, particularly on Instagram, is the photography that Torn Space is doing and how you've really captured the energy of those performances. So I'm just curious, when you think about kind of, of sharing what you're doing and what those events look like within a space like that, what's important to you? Like what do you want people to see or understand as you kind of try and share that message somewhere like social media?
For the last project, it's twofold. One, it's to kind of highlight the image itself, but also show the larger context of where the image is happening. So you're seeing the neighborhood that we work with, which is the Broadway Fillmore neighborhood. The neighborhood itself is engaged in the overall aesthetic and the design. It's for people to be aware of this neighborhood, to start to engage with the neighborhood. It's a neighborhood, I think, that for too long people have tried to pretend doesn't exist, or maybe it exists during Easter time when they go to the Broadway market, but then there's long stretches of time where it's just sort of kind of pushed off to the side. So it's about saying, you can't really have a thriving community if large sections of that community are not being engaged with. Children live here, businesses are occupying this area. How can we, in our small way as an arts organization, help encourage greater awareness of this particular vital part of our larger kind of neighborhood?
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Well, let's move right along here. So next, I want to talk to Idris about your thoughts on evolution. So sort of an iterative, creative process, the work that you do. How do you explore your own capabilities, push your own capabilities, find spaces for experimentation, and kind of see where your art takes you?
It's a great question. One of the things that I do is, I mentioned it, just briefly minutes ago about following your muse, So I think that's for me personally, as an artist and as creative, I follow my muses. Like I follow the things that make me ponder and make me, there's a question that I always entertain, which is just like, what if? I always kind of just follow the what if. And the what ifs do come along with some apprehension. They come along with some fears, if there's spaces that you haven't explored and then you aren't familiar with. However, that's where growth always is. Fear, I understand, is very real. It means different things to different people. The way that I look at my practice, though, particularly art, I explore, right? I explore. And I kind of stay aware, like I keep an awareness of my peripheral, right? So as I'm going, this is the road that I'm on, but I always keep an eye out as if like you're just kind of walking through a park, so to speak, right? I'm just looking and I'll see a cardinal over there. I'll see this. That's how I kind of go about my practice. So there are certain things that may catch my attention, but I'll stay on this path and I just kind of bring them in to my attention, and then maybe they make it into the practice. And if they don't work per se, you will never know that unless you explore and entertain the what if. Nothing. I don't think anything in our practices is, in my practice particularly, is life-threatening. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, what's the worst that can happen if I explore bringing music into my practice? What's the worst that can happen if I explore, my ability to make in metalsmithing, to make jewelry out of precious metals? Like all these things end up informing who I am as a person and as an artist. And so I just would encourage, talking about evolution, like evolution is necessary. Like even as human beings, we have to evolve. Like we have to evolve or we perish. It's pretty simple to me. And I feel like, I won't say it's necessary as an artist. However, if you're concerned about being world class in your practice, which is what I'm always focused on, being world class, then that's what I do. I give myself permission to explore and not be afraid to get lost, because this isn't a jungle. You can get lost in the jungle and not make your way back out. In this practice, though, you're able to kind of go in and come back out of it and see and make something of it and see whether it's for you or not. So that's my main thing, is just like, just explore. And always say also that you always get good at what you practice, right? So there are some people that are probably world-class warriors. I'm sometimes one of them. You can be a world-class procrastinator, you can be a complainer, but you get good at whatever you practice. So just make sure whatever you're practicing is something that's worth your time, worth your time, and worth you having a tangible asset at the end of whatever that practice is. So yeah, that's my main thing, is just explore and entertain the what ifs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's entertaining the what ifs. Like, what a great way. Yeah, so much of what you just said is just poetic. We're seeing that in the chat right now. I thought that was wonderful. So talked about I'm gonna build a little bit on this. So you talked about chasing your muse, and when you like what does that look like for you? What does that process look like? Like what is your muse, and does your muse change? I just want to hear more about that, because I think that's such a cool way to frame it.
Yeah. So to elaborate about what the muse is, and so earlier on, as Annie was saying, the advice, we were talking about the advice that we received or the advice that we decided to accept or reject. And for my lifetime thus far, it was always, Idris, pick one. You got to do one thing, this and that. So I've had a career in music. I'm in my career now in the arts. I've had several moments where I was in theater, acting. I've written a play. I'm in my jewelry studio right now. So I have all these components and all these dendrites, all these things that I do. And I mean, and they come about from me following them, and sometimes maybe the muse, I'm following it for a year. Maybe I'm following it for 2 years. Maybe I'm following it for a month, and so I just trust these things. I trust these muses because I learn from them for whatever the duration of time is that I sit with them. I learn from them. And so I've given myself the permission to be, as I mentioned earlier, this multi-hyphenate, just because all of these things make me who I am. And I don't want to be in a box. I've said this before too, like, I don't want to live my life in a box, because we all end in a box. Mm-hmm. So, that's why I just want to stay. I'm going to continue to be this creative rolling stone of, just kind of meandering, and I stay in a place that feels good. And if it doesn't feel good anymore, then, I'll migrate someplace else. But I'm going to continue leaving evidence of myself through my work. That's my goal.
That's awesome. That was great. Thank you so much. We can move on to the next question now too. So Annie, tell me about translating the soul of an artist or a piece of artwork into design. How do you, I think this is a really interesting thing about what you're doing, what you're able to do. How do you create fresh art that also really honors somebody else's artistic vision, the artistic vision of your client, and kind of what can you share on that topic of collaboration?
Yeah, I actually think it really kind of dovetails into like what we were just talking about like not putting yourself in a box and, thinking about having lots of different influences. So for me, the metaphor that I kind of look at it as is that, like, think about like, a maestro or like a conductor in an orchestra, right? Like, their job is to know and love and have a passion for music. You have to be able to read the music and know all about instruments and know about musicians. And musicians are all different kinds of people with all different, backgrounds and passions. And you have to get all of these people on the same page. And, if you do your job right, you all make music together. It's a team effort. And, it's not about you. It's about creating this environment that lets everybody else be creative. So I think that there's always sort of a conflict in yourself as an artist. Like, you're told as a fine artist, it's all, you're a genius in a cave and you have a cool idea and then you emerge, and like, that's awesome. That's valid. You should express yourself for sure. But when you're talking about working with other people, and especially for me, like, my job is not to force my vision onto someone else. My job is to give a visual context to art that is intangible. So I need to listen. And listen doesn't mean, okay, that's cool, but like, here's what I think. Like, really internalize it, really have conversations with people and, listen to what they're saying and come back with like references. So, it's good to like lots of different things. And if you don't know, to be willing to really research and really have, honest conversations. And I think there's a question in the chat that's sort of like, how do you balance the search for high quality creatives without falling prey to, I think it's withholding opportunities to artists that need a hand up. And I think, being able to be someone that is cheering somebody on. Sometimes there's people who like, okay, like maybe they haven't had a lot of experience, but you can see something in their work that like, that if they had the right environment, they could really fly. So maybe, you don't give them the biggest, hugest, crazy project to start because that might be really difficult for them. They need to step up, but maybe you can create something sort of like smaller or medium, do that, and then step up to the next thing. And I think you have to practice having trust and letting go a little bit of that ego in order to like listen to people and really like help them achieve what they want, And sometimes clients will come to you and they'll have what you consider to be terrible taste. And that can be really frustrating when you don't align with somebody. But I think you always have to be digging for truths. There's something, everyone's an artist and we need to like respect that and love that. So what's the truth? Like what's the heart of the matter, something that they're responding to, and like how can we have a dialogue that helps us bring something closer together? And again, really like listening. And yeah.
That was awesome. Absolutely. And I think, is there anybody who wants to build on that concept a little bit as well?
Yeah, if no one else does, I saw the question in the chat as well. It's talking about how do you balance the search for high quality creatives without falling prey to gatekeeping, withholding opportunities to artists who need a hand up. So I just want to speak to the part about artists who need a hand up, right? So artists certainly can be put in better position to thrive with exposure. We all know this. However, I want artists and creatives to unsubscribe to this notion of being selected or waiting to be picked. Like, you should not be waiting to be picked, because that, in my opinion, is kind of thwarting and negatively impacting your work. Do the work. Make sure you're doing the work. A friend of mine always told me, one of my mentors, I mean, we're almost the same age, but I still see him as a mentor. And we were talking years ago about, I'm still living in Buffalo and how I'm kind of struggling to find my way as an artist and such, and blah, 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 blah. And he was like, well, he said, have you created any work? And I was like, well, yeah, kind of. And he was like, well, you can't even have because I was doing several things. But he was like, well, you can't even have the conversation with people unless you have the work. So you can't, as artists, you can't sit here and wait to be picked and say, or I'm an artist, I'm looking for an opportunity. What's the opportunity? And then produce the work first. So that way you'll have you'll be prepared when the conversation does arrive. And if it doesn't, create something for yourself. Create something for yourself and know what you're in it for.
Oh, yes. And that's, yes, more great advice. So many things I feel like you could build on with that. And Ed too, especially given, the work that you're doing, I'm curious, how you would build on that as well. And kind of what your thoughts are. I have a question for you too, but I want to hear you build on that first.
Okay, build on.
Oh, I'm sorry. What we were just talking about there related to all of the concepts that Idris was just discussing.
Oh, me? You want me to elaborate?
Oh no, I'm confused. I'm so sorry. I have. Okay, so Edmund, I was gonna have you build on what was just being discussed. Sorry.
Yeah. So my background is creative writing, but my job here at Hall Walls, which is a nonprofit been around a long time, and is multidisciplinary. Multidisciplinary means that I did take notes on what some people said before, and I wanted to go back to that. I didn't really want to interrupt the flow, but I took some notes on what a couple things that Idris said, and also Annie. But first I want to say that Hall Walls is multidisciplinary, which means we present pretty much all the disciplines of contemporary art, visual arts, all the visual art forms, music, live music, literature, performance, film, video, all those things. But it also means that we really encourage and really support, right from the beginning, since almost 50 years ago when Hall Walls started, artists who work across disciplines, artists who do what Idris does, work in multiple disciplines, and give opportunities to artists to either work in new ways where they're trying things out in maybe disciplines other than the ones that are in their comfort zone, and also to present art to the public, but also to artists, to inspire them to try different things in their art. So we present a lot of local artists, local musicians, as well as bringing artists from all over the world, all over North America, and often create opportunities for visiting artists, what we call artists in residence, who are from out of town, to come and work with artists locally, which helps it's mutually supportive of the resident artist and the local artists, who get to expand how they're working, learn from the other artists, teach the other artists. I believe in curating. I do believe in presenting and choosing really great work to show to the public, and to encourage artists to go deeper and wider in their own work. So I don't really accept the term of gatekeeping when it comes to curating, because I think curating is a real thing, and curators are have skills of their own, and out of that comes great artistic experiences. I wanted to go back to one of the Idris is a great example of someone who works in a lot of different disciplines, and he does amazing work in all of them. I'm thinking of obviously as a visual artist, from from small drawings to large murals, one of our most active and talented artists in the city. But also I think of his play that I saw at Paul Robeson Theater, The Sidewalk, one of the best things I've seen, where he's mixing theater and the visuals that he created for the set, and words, language, acting. That was amazing to me. Dan Shanahan and Torn Space Theater have done amazing work with multimedia, working with video, especially in a way that really, we have lots of great theater companies, but that's the one that's most out there in terms of using multimedia. So, and one of the jobs at Hall Walls also is to, and I feel personally, whether it's on social media or by my presence, is to support all the other organizations, all the artists, what the other organizations are doing, all the shows there are, all the other galleries, because it's part of a community. And I think it's a really vibrant community, and no one has to go anywhere else than Buffalo to be doing amazing work that's as good as work you'll find anywhere. Going back to what I thought it was interesting what Annie said early on, because she mentioned Brian Grunert and White Bicycle. He's a great example of a really talented artist, designer. He worked with Ani DeFranco. Ani DeFranco is a great example of a creative person who also, instead of like at the beginning of her career, signing she had many opportunities to sign big record contracts with labels, and instead she created her own label and based it here in Buffalo, called Righteous Babe Records. And out of that grew this building that I'm sitting in, Babeville, which is an art center and has so many venues, not just hall walls, but including hall walls for music and art. And so she was, you know, she now lives in New Orleans. She sold her house here, so she is really not as oriented towards Buffalo, but she contributed so much over, you know, let's say from the beginning of her career to just a few years ago, created so much. This building, her record label, White Bicycle and Brian Gruner designed packaging for her records that have been nominated many times for Grammy Awards. And we've used White Bicycle and Brian Gruner many times in our, you know, for our design. So we're here to support artists, musicians. We get a lot of support from local businesses for what we do, because we're a nonprofit, and businesses are very generous in supporting what we do. And we support businesses, designers, printers that we pay, and artists who we pay. Right now we have the members show up. This is the one show every year where there really is no gatekeeping. It's not curated, it's not juried, and all you have to be is a member, and anyone can be a member. And whatever people bring in for this show, it's always the biggest show of the year. It's always the most popular opening. Our curators, who have great eyes and great skills at installation, have to make the show look good, but they haven't picked the work that's in the show. This is our biggest ever. It's the 47th annual Hall Walls Member Show. It has 195 works in the show, but we also sell the art for the artists. We've already sold 15 works. The show just opened Friday. One other thing I want to say on behalf of Daemen College, which is something that I just learned, is that there's this very famous painter. She died in 2007, Elizabeth Murray, and Hall Walls showed her work in 1976. And I've always known that part of our history, that she was in this big painting show in 1976. But what I just learned, because of the mural at Buffalo Academy for Visual and Performing Arts, that Cecily Brown came and worked with local artists on that. It's a beautiful mural. And I learned then, and I learned from an exhibition that's up right now that everybody has to see called Back in Town at the UB Anderson Art Gallery, that Elizabeth Murray, right out of art school, moved to Buffalo for her first teaching job, which was at Daemen College, which was in 1965 to 67. And was that at that time an all-women's Catholic college called Rosary Hill. And she had an amazing, they were two really important formative years. Her first 2 years as a professional artist after art school, and before she moved to New York and became very famous. She lived on the East Side on Woodland, right near BAFPA, and Cecily Brown in her mural sort of paid homage to that history by painting the row houses in the mural, one of which Elizabeth Murray lived in at the time. So that's a great part of Buffalo history that I didn't even know about until that mural project and this show at the UB Anderson Gallery. So I'm always learning. We're always trying to make sure that artists have plenty of creative opportunities here, and designers, all kinds of creatives, and don't have to necessarily leave town, and can at least work from here as a base and get their work out in the world, definitely. I'm not saying that there's enough of a market or a big enough audience here to satisfy really, talented and ambitious artists, but Buffalo can be a really great base for creative people, whether musicians, visual artists, designers, to work from.
Absolutely. I have a question prepared for you, but I feel that you've just answered so many, like you've just taken.
If I answered it, that's fine.
Well, I guess I'm looking at it right now. With Hall Walls Contemporary Arts Center, you really nurture this strong creative community, and you've just done such a wonderful job describing it and its value. So I guess, maybe I'll just improvise a little bit and say, is there anything through that process, any value you've realized, or, something that maybe surprised you that you weren't expecting?
That I learned from the artists? I mean, I guess, Well, first of all, no one institution or organization can do it themselves. So to me, I learn and work from and work with my colleagues and co-sponsor things and collaborate. We have a major collaboration right now with the Historic Colored Musicians Club, and they've been around over 100 years. Hallwalls has been around almost 50 years. So between the two of us, we've been around 150 years serving musicians and artists in Buffalo, and but this is a formal partnership that we launched it just before the pandemic started. So we had to kind of like put it on hold, and now we're back and working with the folks over there. I learned so much about audience, about the depth of the talent we have here now, the depth of the history of jazz and Black music in Buffalo. And it's really important collaboration for us right now.
Wonderful. Well,
I don't know if that answers your question, but I learn all the time from, every show I go to, every show we have here and every show I go to at all the other galleries. And, just talking to people. I learned a lot. Yesterday, this great artist, Ari Moore, came by, and I ended up talking to her and my wife Cheryl happened to drop in, and we were talking to Ari for like an hour and a half, and we learned so much about a lot of aspects of history. I mean, I can't get into the details, but just talking to people here and learning from them their stories, and that was an amazing experience. And that wouldn't have happened if she hadn't walked in, just to see this show, and I was here to greet her and to chat.
Wonderful. That's great. And yes, you absolutely answered the question. Great. So much wonderful, stuff that you just shared with us. So we are going to take a break. So brief break for a message from Daemen's Graduate Studies, and then we'll be right back.
Daemen College, we strive to help every student reach their educational and professional goals. With exceptional resources and one-of-a-kind learning experiences, our graduate and professional programs will put you on the right path to career success. Our graduate programs include applied behavior analysis, education, nursing, social work, and more. 7 of our 11 graduate programs are open to any undergraduate major. Explore our graduate programs today by visiting daemen.edu/graduate.
Okay, welcome back. And we are going to keep going. So on to the next series of questions here. Javon, we are going to talk to you again for a second here. So you described a little bit about Wildcat Media to us and how it's such a force to bring people together. And I think it does exactly what you set out to do. It influences culture. It encourages connection. In the past, you've talked about legacy and sort of expanding Wildcat Media and its community. What's it like to kind of bring others into that universe? How do you do it? And also, I would say, Dan, given that, Javon talked a little bit about your role in this too, if you want to add anything to what Javon shares, please feel free.
Oh, thank you. It's a couple of things that, I could touch on when it comes to this topic. First thing, building the proper team, I think is very essential. We had lots of students, lots of creative students, really, look at Wildcat Media as a place where they can really unfold their creative, vision. One student in particular, Jake Perry, he came in as just, wanted to do sports. And he eventually found a passion for video content and creating, visuals. And he actually is looking into, really starting his own videography service. And he's been pretty successful at it. And I've been able to watch him grow from being, just a student. He was actually one of my residents, and to unfold and to actually, get paid for his work. We have many other students that are on our team that, started out as regular hosts and producers. And, they were able to unfold and really step out the comfort zone that I talked about earlier. And, it's very important that you can actually witness, yourself and others do that, because, when you talk about legacy, it shows that, this can be done. I don't think in the past we had students, actually, make things happen in terms of, starting something and showing the results. And, for people to see that is very important. So in terms of making a team, we have visual producers, we have audio producers, and interviewers, hosts, and all of that. And I think, in the whole scheme of things, when you talk about media and entertainment, those things are important. The second thing I would kind of touch on is like building connections. And I know we talked about that earlier. When they think about Wildcat Media and being that I was a senior this year, graduating, like what's going to happen to me? What's the next step for Wildcat Media? What's going to be, the future of Wildcat Media? And, it was a lot of strategic thinking behind that because, we weren't really a traditional student organization like other student organizations. We kind of took like the other route. And I kind of, at first, I was looking at it from, how can we really expand our resources? And with the departments that we have in our school, I looked at student activities as a possible avenue. We also do events, but then I realized that it's really the communications and media side of things that we should hone in on. And institutional advancements, which holds the media and communications department, we're actually en route to transition under them as like a part of their student, driven team. And that's something that we're working on this summertime to really hold in place. And, I just want to thank like the connections that I made over there with Emily Perryman, Christy, Dave Seifert, Daniel Robison, and Cam Garrity. We were able to, really lock in the strategic plan for what Wildcat Media looks like in the future. I'm excited because it really shows that, hopefully when I come back and visit Daemen College 10 years from now, we can still see Wildcat Media, going strong. And the vision, I know I talked about this with Professor Shanahan yesterday, having a strong vision statement. When I came in, it was really about just ensuring that, we have a team that can influence culture and create a fun environment for students and the Daemen College community. And I want to stick to that. So that's pretty much my spill.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I would just jump in on what Javon is saying, this last point. I think one of the skills I think that Javon has been able to really demonstrate is an ability to kind of talk to many different individuals that he needs to pull together to make this happen. So he kind of works, he sort of moves effortlessly between talking with the artist, talking with an administrator, talking to what will become potential funders in order to sort of solidify this organization. And then this ties back to what Javon just mentioned, the need for a vision statement. When we're in the nonprofit sector, we are always aware of what our mission statement is, and this becomes kind of a boilerplate 3-sentence phrase. But I think as an arts organization, the need to have a vision statement or a manifesto that's sort of documented becomes really crucial, because as you start to grow an organization and as leadership changes and new people kind of come in, if you want to create this catalyst of an artistic movement, whatever that might be, that really has to sort of be built into the actual documentation of the organization, so that it doesn't get manipulated or get shifted by the whims of whomever kind of comes and goes within the organization. So I think what we're seeing Javon do, in a really great way, is to kind of lay the strong foundation for an organization that will be able to grow after he kind of moves on from the college and someone else moves into his leadership position.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to just say, we are so thrilled to have Javon and all of the amazing work he's done, obviously. All right, great to hear about that. I want to jump back to Jen. So Jen, I'm curious, what is something a creative professional could do right now to build their network and their brand?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to build on a lot of the conversations we had in the first half of the panel. But, if I'm kind of thinking about a few words that are really inspiring, it's anything, right? Anything, something, create, inspire. Idris said it earlier, if you don't create the work, that's where you start. And so start there, create the work, right? Start really getting in tune to what your creative process is or what your creative output is. But on a more practical sense, I'm a big fan of go out there. Ed talked a lot about, the different galleries and events and activities that he's either been a part of at Hall Walls or has gone to. And it's really about that sense of community. And so if you're going out there and you're going to gallery openings and you're going to theater performances, or you're just going out in the neighborhood and the communities to see what's going on, and you're just networking with anyone and talking about and creating that synergy of I'm doing this kind of work or I'm interested in this. Idris said it earlier too, it's the unexpected connections. Just have the conversations. Something I didn't mention earlier is that I'm also an adjunct at Daemen in the entrepreneurship minor. And I actually use my experiences at Art Services to integrate into the discussions that we have in class. And it's really interesting because some of the students are in an artistic discipline. So they don't actually realize until that moment that we may have a synergy and we can work on something beyond just what we're working on in the classroom when it comes to their artistic careers. And so that's really interesting, but we would never know that unless we shared that information with each other. So I think it's really important just to be present, be out there, explore what you don't know. You can't know everything. And so just going out and meeting the different individuals, whether it's arts community, education, I truly feel that all professional sectors intersect at some point or another, maybe not all at the same time, but you never know who you're going to meet or who's going to be interested in your creative process. So there's really that in-person aspect. And then obviously there's also, having a website, having that online presence, 21st century, making sure you have all those tools in your tool belt. But it's that nice blend of having work, being able to present it, and then also being there in person and networking as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So to build on that a little bit too, I think, Ed, we're going to jump back to you, Edmund. So sometimes the best collaborations are unexpected. Are there avenues that you would like to see more artists explore, collaborations you would like to see happen, just any spaces where you see opportunity for that sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't see a shortage of collaborations. I just see so many collaborations happening, and there's new organizations in town, that haven't, that have just been around a short time, that are doing them. So, the one I talked about with Cecily Brown, that was actually an artist brought in by the UB Art Collaboratory, UB Art Collaboratory, and the Buffalo Academy of Visual and Performing Arts, which we're also a partner with. We bring a lot of artists into the school there. And then they found that connection with, Daemen's history and the show at UB Anderson Gallery. So I think that everybody, all my colleagues who are, curators and arts administrators are always open to collaborations and are always supportive of them. And they can happen in all kinds of different ways. I mean, one that came from a very unexpected direction was a UB professor who approached me last spring. Would we partner on this project that's happening this coming school year, academic year, for around veterans, and especially all veterans, but combat veterans from who had went through Afghanistan and Iraq, and they applied for a grant to the National Endowment for the Humanities, and we were a partner, and they got that grant. So we're doing that project this year, starting in the fall through next spring. And that was one I didn't really expect, although we've done a lot of collaboration with with UB, with the English Department, Humanities Institute, the Science, the School of Arts and Sciences, the Art Museum, the Science Museum, Buffalo Science Museum, we have done this project since 2009 of science and art cabarets, bringing scientists and artists together. And that had to be sort of suspended during pandemic because we couldn't have events and because of restrictions at the university, but that's going to be coming back this year. So, you know, we've taken the time over the past year to kind of plan things that can now happen in this coming year. And I just see so many collaborations of all kinds that I don't see a shortage of them. I see great ones. And you know, and again, they're between nonprofits, businesses, schools, institutions of higher education. I really, you know, there's so many happening all the time, and there, you know, there can never be too many. But I think we live in a place where collaboration, you know, with all the what I would consider, you know, good organizations, large and small, they're always collaborating and involving artists in these collaborations. In our case, because we're an arts organization.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, and the point about collaboration too, I think, you know, I mentioned this to some colleagues recently, but I went to a pop-up art show at a brewery. There were all these incredible, you know, lots of young Buffalo artists, and also the owner of What's Poppin' Popcorn, which is a new popcorn place on the West Side. And I thought, how interesting just to kind of see, you know, this great collection of artists here, and then also, you know, really entrepreneurs that are entering the space and sort of finding so much energy in that setup, which is just, it's so much fun to see. So I love this idea of collaboration and how it's kind of working its way through Buffalo. So okay, I think Annie, I did want to kind of hear some of your thoughts on that as well, and you know, kind of anything you want to build off of what Ed discussed.
Yeah. So just like trying to write a few notes to organize my thoughts. I think because the name of this whole talk that we're here for is talking about shaping, you know, culture and, you know, empowering other people. I think that, you know, collaboration is very key to that. And I know we've touched on a few things that I might want to just challenge a little bit. And I'll just speak to my own experiences. But I think that now that I'm an art director, right? And so like my job is to connect people and to make this team work together. I have to really look at the privilege that I have, which is suggesting people, which, you know, if you only present a certain kind of person to your client who is trusting you, you are gatekeeping. You're the problem. So in my industry, gatekeeping is a really big problem. And it's really good to give people advice and say, shoot your shot, go for it, talk to this person. And then what? Then what happens? So I think that, you know, those of us who are in these spaces, and generally as an artist, you really need to question, why are things the way they are? What can we do to disrupt these spaces? And sometimes that's an uncomfortable topic, and sometimes that's a little bit difficult. But I think, you know, it's really important to challenge people, because that's how we are able to bring opportunities to empower people and to make, you know, actual changes. And I think, you know, being someone that's worked on like indie side and now has worked in like a bigger label side, there are definitely problems within the systems that all of us perpetrate in our own lives. So when we are artists, I think within our own work, we need to, you know, question ourselves, dismantle why we think a certain way, challenge ourselves to find other perspectives, and to really like, you know, if you're going to elevate someone, really like trust them, let them have that space. And, you know, don't be afraid to be in a room with people and be like, all right, why are these the people in the room? And what can we be doing? And actually do it, not just, you know, raise a question. So going back to collaboration, I think, you know, it's really, really important to, you know, as we were talking very early on, make the art that you love. And yes, people will find that. And also like, don't be afraid to like, you know, talk to people and share that. And, collaborate with your friends, because sometimes you're going to find that there are systems that are broken, and creating your own community and reflecting your own values is what makes where you are even stronger. So, the fact that like Wildcat Media came out of this amazing idea and then is now empowering more people, like I want to see more of that. I think that's wonderful. And how can we, continue that, and what are things that we can do to support it?
Yes. Yes, thank you for making those points. Beautifully put. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, now we are going to move into a little bit about marketing and branding. So Idris, we talk a lot about marketing and branding for artists, and how artists can kind of secure fresh opportunities and make sure that they are getting paid for their work. So do you have any advice on this, from any angle, from the standpoint of, just how you put your art out in the space, the relationships that you're building, anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I have two forms of thought on that. So one of the things that I would say that I'm not so good at is I'm very aware of marketing tools, methods, and strategies that have proven measured results. Like, I'm very aware of those things. I have not invested too much time and dug deep enough into them to put them into practice for me, So the way that I go about it, though, is I stick to my authenticity. I kind of let my authenticity do the speaking for me, and kind of being my marketing arm, so to speak, because through my authenticity, I have my own compass, and I allow that compass, as I mentioned earlier about how I kind of explore, like I allow my compass to kind of show me the direction. And if you're sensitive enough to the things that give you interaction or give you engagement, the things that give you engagement, those are the things, as I was talking about before, about on the peripheral, those are the things you need to kind of reply to, respond to, kind of analyze and think of, okay, what did I do right here? Or what did I do that, was a breakthrough? What did I do that was a success? What did I do that led to these people contacting me about my writing, about my art, about my music, about my whatever? And then you just kind of continue hammering on those things. So that method that I use is a slower method. But again, I know what I'm doing, in the sense of me being authentic to the work that I want to produce and the work that I want to share and that I put out. I have control over that. I don't necessarily have control over, who's going to respond to the work. The other way, which is the first one I mentioned, though, there are tools. There's tons of tools, that people and methods and strategies that people use. To kind of build their numbers, so to speak. I would just kind of encourage those that are kind of just starting out to not be so driven by the numbers. I found myself beating myself up a lot of times, like, oh, I've only got 1,300 followers, only got 2,000 followers. I'm like, that doesn't necessarily give you the connections that you want. Lots of opportunities will come, just kind of based off of this number system. But again, your authenticity, my authenticity is my compass. And so that way, the projects that I do get based off of that are the ones that are more meaningful and more impacting to the community that I want to affect. So it doesn't matter, at that point for me about, my social media handle, or how many numbers it has there. The work that I do is that it has the larger meteoric impact. You know what I'm saying? So that's as best as I can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, and also, Idris, did you have a cat or a dog with you? Well, I just wanted to see.
Yeah, I had to put him on his way. That's our little rescue dog, our COVID rescue dog.
That was cute. Okay, well, I'm glad he stopped by. So that was fantastic. As all of these responses have been today. I I do want to jump back to Annie for a minute here, because I want to talk to you about your illustrations for Star Wars Women of the Galaxy, specific project that you worked on. So Star Wars Rebels, Sabine, my Rebel sketchbook. This was so interesting. We took a look at this when we were developing the questions, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what it's like to tell the stories of such fascinating characters through your illustrations, and where does your inspiration come from? Do you see yourself in any of these characters? Kind of coming back to that idea of Muse that we talked about earlier. How is that reflected in your work?
Yeah, 100%. I actually think the story behind how all this happened ties a lot into all the themes that we've been talking today. So my entire life have always loved Star Wars. My grandpa bought us a VHS player, and we just my whole family, we actually had a car with the license plate Yoda 5, and we were trying to go over the border, and the border people made a joke about it, whatever. Anyways, loved Star Wars as a little kid. And I would draw, I would doodle, I would sketch, and that's always been a part of my process. And when I went to Daemen, people actually encouraged me. They were like, you can incorporate illustration into your design. You don't have to just do one thing. That can be something that makes you unique as a designer. So don't shy away that you like these different things. So I've always drawn and stuff like that. And I ended up going to a portfolio review at New York Comic Con. And I didn't really have a penciler and an inker's a portfolio. I had my graphic design and some Star Wars sketches. And this is where I met Troy Alders, who's this really amazing art director. And we just had this connection and this talk. And I was I'm just curious, do you ever hire designers? Just have a conversation. I wasn't expecting a job or anything out of it. I just kind of went and said, hey, what's the worst that can happen? I just kind of want to know about people that work in this industry. It's fascinating to me. And he was actually, I am looking for a designer, and I see that you do music, and I see that you love Star Wars, but that you also, do design and draw. And so I got his information. I gave him mine, but I was give me yours. And so I, followed up with him. Didn't hear back from him, followed up again, and then he gave me a gift. Started doing design for merchandising for Lucasfilm. So, if you go to Target or whatever, in the holiday times, they have ugly sweatshirts and stuff with the Star Wars characters. There's a whole bunch of those that I designed, and it was really cool. And when I would work with him, I would have conversations just, about what I liked, and we would talk about music. And I remember him being okay, this rock style that you do, can you apply this to Yoda? So yeah, I was being nerdy and being oh my god, I'm doing an Empire Strikes Back shirt, I gotta put the tauntauns and stuff. But then the way that I did music stuff, he wanted me to apply that to it. And when I would correspond with him, sometimes I'm doing it right now, I would draw doodles in the notebook. It's just part of my learning process, just how I handle things. He never forgot that about me. So flash forward to a few years, I hadn't done the freelance stuff anymore because I was at Sony at that point. But Star Wars Rebels came out, and they were doing a sketchbook for Sabine, who's this character that's a demolitions expert, and she also draws and she graffitis, and it's kind of disrupting the system and all that kind of stuff. And he thought of me. He pitched me as basically Lucasfilm's preferred person to Trio Press. They were this is who we want. And when he contacted me about it, he was you're like this character, and you think like her, you do the doodles. And that's what this book was. It was a book of doodles and being imaginative. And so it was almost you had to kind of method act a little bit to be like her and just draw. I messed up my apartment wall. I went outside and upset all the old ladies because I was spray painting, and I really, really got into that. And that was a really cool experience. I was so grateful for it. And flash forward another year or two, the fans who were a fan of this niche little book really loved it. People that were aware that I was the person that did the Sabine sketches and did the first in canon Bothan sketch and all this kind of stuff. And so when the larger book publisher went to do Women of the Galaxy, my name was again put in this pool of people of like, oh, like she's a fan, but she's also an artist. She's already done this thing before, so we know that she can handle it. And so I was asked to create a drawing of Sabine for this book, and then I ended up doing a couple of other drawings for them too, which was like such a super cool, crazy, honor, and it was really fun. But the story of it is really just, not being afraid to ask questions and to bring your experiences to whatever job you do. So going back to that question about like authenticity and like how do you get yourself out there, the number of followers next to your name is not your self-worth. But what matters is that when you do have these opportunities that you can, connect, and that you are authentic about yourself, and you don't try to be something that you aren't.
Perfect. It's so interesting to hear all of that and to think about, all of the inspiration that goes into something like that when it's out there in the world. So I want to close out with a question for Dan, and his perspective on this. So Dan, how do you see artists and entrepreneurs colliding? How do you think young artists in particular are sort of reinventing and redefining this whole creative space?
Sure. I appreciate you use the word colliding because it suggests that the artist and the entrepreneur are sort of separate tracks, and then eventually they sort of have to inevitably cross over. And that is how I see it. I think in the best case scenario, the artist or the arts organization is able to kind of grow itself, grow its vision outside of kind of concerns of business or the market in its early goings. Torn Space started as a very ad hoc experiment. I believe Hallwell's was very much in a similar kind of state where it was kind of grouped around needs of a particular moment and needs of artists who were working in that space. And then in time, through just sort of inevitable aging, you can no longer pull in volunteers anymore, and you're no longer as kind of cute, and people aren't doing you the favors in the same way or volunteering their time, and so you start to have to sort of move into a kind of structured space. And I think that the artist and the organization then has to kind of embrace this sense of entrepreneurship, especially, and I'm taking this through a lens very much of kind of this sort of working class upbringing. If the artist or the arts organization is not benefited by having kind of a family that can kind of support their apartment in New York as they're getting their feet underneath them, or give them seed funding to kind of create that arts organization, then it's really kind of falls on the shoulder of the artists themselves. And so the artist then, I think, has to have a very clear understanding of the funding priorities or the funding language of that moment. Again, Ed and I came through a period of time with Erie County funding when it was the terminology was art as a business. Now we're working into terminology that art is a way to kind of activate neighborhoods and place, and that language will change because it always does and it always will. And so I think the artist, and this is not saying the artist needs to be sort of really slick about this at all, but they just need to be sort of very cognitive of what is the sort of present needs of the moment and how can they articulate what it is they're doing, kind of aligns with various funding priorities, marketing strategies that are kind of in vogue at that time, so they can kind of organize themselves and sustain themselves, and then start to grow and make a lasting presence in whatever community they're existing within. And that's only going to happen with economics. It's only going to happen through finance after a period of time. And then I know we're up against it here, but your other question, which is, what do I think younger artists are doing within this space? I think one of the things they're doing, which is very exciting, is I don't think they're seeing the same lines between kind of commercial art, fine art, business, kind of art for art's sake. I think it's all kind of merging into one interesting space, and we're seeing it, right? It's pushed out through these kind of large corporate arms such as TikTok and Instagram. So they're kind of working within that language, but still kind of pressing out their own vision. I'm certainly a kind of came of age of the 90s. And so there was this term sellout, which was such a big term. And I use it now with people who are younger than me, and it doesn't resonate. It means nothing, which I think is important to note. I think that they embrace the kind of the merger of the commercial and the fine art in a way that I think artists of my generation weren't. And it's not putting a value on one or the other. I think it's just an exciting kind of place where this younger artistic generation is going. Javon and I have often talked about, Virgil Abloh from Off-White and Louis Vuitton as an excellent example of an artist who's able to kind of merge in and out of these various spaces and use that as his craft. So I'm hustling here to get in on one at one.
No, that's so okay. It's not going to shut off.
I will close on that statement to say that the future looks bright.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. You didn't have to move too fast. That's okay. So we are at time here. Dan, unless you have anything else you want to add there. So I want to say thank you to everyone on this panel. I mean, it was so tremendous to hear from all of you and all of your different perspectives. I cannot thank you enough. So thank you to everyone who made this panel possible. Of course, our sponsor, the graduate programs at Daemen College. Visit www.daemen.edu for more information. And then, of course, keep watching for more interactive virtual events with more wonderful panelists. Coming soon, pay attention to our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Daemen College, we understand your college journey may be different this year, and we make it easy. With no SAT or ACT required, 4-year tuition guarantee for students who apply early decision, and holistic admissions reviews, the application process is simple. Plus, Daemen offers over 65 undergraduate majors and programs, so there's something for just about everyone. Not